Vivid verses.
The morning she left, I made coffee. I know that sounds like I'm reaching for something symbolic, some quiet metaphor about routine persisting through rupture. But it wasn't that. I made coffee because I was thirsty and I needed to think, and I think better when my hands are doing something ordinary. So I stood at the counter, listened to the percolator, and listened to Sod moving around in the bedroom. The particular rhythm of her footsteps, quick, purposeful, not the loose shuffle of someone still deciding, told me everything before she said a word. She came into the kitchen with her hair done. That was the first detail I registered. Not the overnight bag sitting heavy on her shoulder, not the coat she'd put on even though it was warm, not the way she stood just past the doorway like she wanted a clear path to the hall. Her hair was done, and I remember thinking, she planned this. She got up early. She styled her hair. She wanted to look a certain way for this conversation, which told me this wasn't grief. This was an announcement. "Theo," she said. I poured a second cup out of habit, then set it on the counter without pushing it toward her. That small adjustment, pouring it, then not offering it, felt accurate. "I need to talk to you," she said. "I can see that." Saad was 31, a project coordinator who'd spent most of our relationship describing herself as someone who'd always faded into the background. Too quiet, she'd say. Not the type people noticed. She had this way of shrinking slightly when she entered rooms, like an apology for taking up space. I'd spent what felt like years trying to convince her that was a story she was telling herself, not a fact about who she was. She had a laugh that changed a room. She was sharper than she gave herself credit for. But she'd carried that old narrative with her, the way some people carry an injury, protecting it almost like it had become part of how she understood herself. Then, about 5 months before this kitchen conversation, something shifted. She'd started going to the gym consistently. That was the surface of it. But underneath, she'd begun receiving the kind of external validation she'd apparently been waiting for her entire adult life. A colleague at work, someone named Brendan, whose name I heard 3 times more than felt natural, had told her she looked different. A woman in her Thursday spin class had asked for her routine. She'd gotten new photos taken for a work presentation and spent 40 minutes telling me how the photographer had said she had great natural symmetry. I was glad for her. I want to be clear about that. I was genuinely glad that she felt better in her skin. What I was less glad about, what I noticed with the particular clarity I get when I'm watching something unfold and trying to understand it before it arrives, was that her improved self-regard was almost entirely indexed to these external observations. She felt worthy because Brendan said she looked different. She felt interesting because someone in spin class asked about her routine. The measurements were always coming from outside, and I was not enough of an external source because I'd known her before. "I don't think I'm being the best version of myself in this relationship," she said. I drank my coffee. "I think I've been holding back," she continued. "I think there are things I want to explore, and I can't do that if we're... Are you seeing someone?" She blinked. "No." "Are you in love with someone?" "No. That's not what this is." "Okay." I set the cup down. "Then what is it?" She gave me a long look, the kind to try to read how much trouble honesty will cause, and then said, more carefully than the previous sentences, "I feel like I've changed, and I don't think our relationship has kept up with that." There it was. I've turned that sentence over many times since. I've changed, and our relationship hasn't kept up. I understood what it meant. What it meant was, I'm suddenly getting attention from people who didn't pay attention to me before, and I want to find out what that's worth. What it meant was, I don't know my ceiling yet, and I want to go find it, and I can't do that from here. What it meant, though she would never have said it in these terms, was, I think I might be able to do better now. And the part she didn't say, the part one don't think she'd consciously articulated to herself, was that she expected me to fight for it. I know this because of the way she watched me after she said it. not the lowered eyes of someone who's ashamed. Level waiting. She was measuring my reaction. She was looking for distress. I didn't give her any. Okay, I said. She waited. I hear you, I said. And I'm not going to try to talk you out of it. A small crease appeared between her eyebrows. I think you should do what you need to do, I said. I mean that without any edge on it. You want to leave, and that's your call to make. I didn't expect you to be so. So what? She didn't finish that sentence. Instead, she shifted the bag on her shoulder and said she'd come back for the rest of her things over the weekend, that she hoped we could be adults about it, that she hoped I understood this wasn't about me being a bad person. I know, I said, and then she left. I finished my coffee. The weeks after were unremarkable in a way I appreciated. I am not, by nature, a dramatic person. I don't perform grief. I felt the absence of her. That's real, that's honest, but I felt it the way you feel the absence of background noise after it stops. You notice it, and then you adjust, and you go about things. What I mostly did in those early weeks was work and think and figure out what I actually missed versus what I was just used to. This is a distinction I find useful. Habit and love are not the same thing, and they're easy to confuse in the period right after a breakup, when everything familiar suddenly has a hole in it. I missed certain conversations. I missed her specific laugh, that real one, not the polite version she deployed for people she was trying to impress. I missed the late-night meals we'd put together out of whatever was in the fridge, that particular loose creativity that happens when there's no occasion to perform for. I did not miss the last 8 or so months of the relationship, which I'd spent in the low-grade effort of pretending not to notice what I was noticing. My friend Kwame, who has the useful habit of saying obvious things plainly, said to me about 3 weeks after, "She left because she thinks she's hot now." "That's reductive," I said. "Is it wrong?" I considered it. It's incomplete. What's the complete version? I thought about it. She left because she finally started receiving external validation she'd always wanted, and she wanted to find out what she could do with it, which is understandable. But the way she framed it to herself and to me was that the relationship was holding her back, and that's where I stopped being sympathetic. Kwame nodded. Because you weren't holding her back. I was doing the opposite. For years. Right? But she needed to believe that story, I said, because the honest version, I want to see if I can get someone with more options than the guy who loved me when I felt invisible, that one doesn't have a very flattering protagonist. Kwame thought about this for a moment. So what do you do? Nothing, I said. I just don't wait. I did not wait. I went back to being, without the specific weight of that relationship, someone I'd been before, but sharper at the edges. I spent more time with friends I'd been half present with for years. I took on a project at work that required more of my attention and gave more back. I started cooking properly again, which might sound minor, but was actually significant. There is something clarifying about caring for yourself in small daily ways when you've recently had evidence that your instinct to care for someone was poorly targeted. About 2 months after Saad left, a woman named Camille appeared at a dinner party at Kwame's place. I don't have a method for these things. I wasn't looking. What I noticed first was that she was laughing at something Kwame's wife had said, and her laugh didn't check whether the room approved of it before it happened. It just happened. It was unself-conscious in a way I found immediately interesting. She worked in environmental consultancy. She'd lived in 3 countries in the previous decade. She had opinions about food that were specific enough to be worth disagreeing with. We talked for most of the evening. I got her number at the end of it. On our second date, she asked me directly, over dinner at a place she'd chosen, a small restaurant with exactly 8 tables, where the owner came out to describe the menu himself. "What happened with your last relationship?" "She left," I said. "Why?" She'd come into a version of herself that she felt the relationship couldn't contain. Camille tilted her head slightly. "What does that mean in plain language?" "She started feeling attractive to other people," I said, and she wanted to find out what that was worth. And what did you do? I let her go. She looked at me for a moment. You didn't try to fight for it? No. Why not? Because she wasn't leaving the relationship, I said. She was leaving towards something. And you can't compete with a fantasy someone's constructed about what their new life is going to feel like. The only move available was to let her walk and live your own life in the meantime. Camille was quiet for a moment. Then, and you're okay with that? Yes. That's either very healthy or very cold. It's neither, I said. It's just accurate. She smiled at that. Not a full smile, the beginning of one, and changed the subject. 6 months after Saad left, she called. I was at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and some reading I'd been meaning to get to for weeks, and my phone lit up with her name, and I looked at it for one full ring before I answered. Theo. Hey. A pause on her end. She'd expected something, I think. A warmer opening, or a cooler one, or some emotional weather she could calibrate herself against. Instead, she got nothing, just acknowledgement. How are you? She said. Good. Busy. You? Yeah. I'm okay. I've been thinking about you. I waited. I wanted to reach out, she said. I think I owe you a conversation. A real one. Okay. Can we do that? We're doing it, I said. What do you want to say? Another pause. She wanted a meeting, I realized. She'd wanted the full staging, a cafe, or one of her old restaurants, neutral ground where she could manage the ambience and the pacing. A phone call, put all the structure on her, and she wasn't ready for it. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she said, about how I left, about what I said. What about it? I don't think I was honest. About my reasons. I said nothing. I think she stopped. Tried again. I told myself a story about the relationship holding me back, and I don't know if that was true. I think I was excited about. I was getting a lot of attention, and I wanted to explore it, I said. Yes. I know, I said. You knew. I knew. A longer silence. And you didn't say anything? What would I have said, Saad? I don't know. Maybe push back. Ask me if I was sure. Something. I was sure, I said. You were sure I wanted to leave? I was sure that if I pushed back, I said, you'd hear it as desperation, which would have confirmed for you that you were right to go. So there was no version of that conversation where me arguing helped either of us. She absorbed this for a moment. That's a very calculated way to look at it. Yes, I agreed. Doesn't it? She hesitated. Didn't it bother you? That I was leaving for that reason? The reason bothered me more than the leaving, I said. Yes. What do you mean? I thought about how to say this, though I hadn't known I'd need to say it out loud. I set my mug down. What bothered me, I said carefully, was that you'd been with me long enough to know what I valued, and you still thought what I needed from you was for you to become someone other people wanted. That part was yes. That was something. She was quiet. I didn't love you because you were invisible, I said. I loved you in spite of the fact that you thought you were. Those are different things. Theo, I'm not trying to make you feel worse, I said. I'm answering your question. I know. Her voice had changed. Something in it was quieter. I think I understand now what I was doing. And I wanted to see if there was any. She stopped. Organized herself. I'm not happy where I am, she said. The things I thought I wanted, the attention, and it felt like proof of something. But the proof didn't actually change anything that mattered. I let that sit for a moment. She wants to come back. Not as a stated thing yet. She was working toward it, gauging the temperature, trying to feel whether the door was open before she said the word. I recognized the approach. I'd watched her use it in other contexts. In disagreements with her mother, in negotiations with her landlord, in any situation where she needed something and wasn't sure she'd be given it. I wasn't angry. I want to record that accurately. What I was sitting at my kitchen table with the phone warm against my ear was simply clear. Saad, I said, I'm glad you're thinking through these things. I mean that. And I'm glad you called because I think this is a conversation that was worth having. But, she said, I'm seeing someone. Silence. I've been for a few months, I said. I thought about Camille, about the 8-table restaurant, and her specific opinions about food and the laugh that didn't ask for permission. It's good. Okay, Saad said. Her voice had gone flat in the way that indicates a person is actively keeping it level. I don't think there was going to be a version of this where we went back to what we had, I said. Not because I'm punishing you, but because what we had stopped working when you started needing to be seen by other people in order to feel like you were worth something. I can't build a relationship on a foundation that depends on external validation. You think I'm shallow, she said. No, I said. I think you were insecure, and I think you confused a solution to the symptoms with a solution to the actual problem, which is a very human mistake. But you're done with it either way. I was done with it the morning you left, I said. Another long silence. She's very beautiful, Saad said then, and the non sequitur of it took me a moment. Sorry, the woman you're seeing. I looked at her. I saw a picture. Someone tagged you both at something. She's very beautiful. I thought about Camille, the way she moved through a room, entirely herself, not managing anyone's impression of her. She is, I said. I guess I thought, she stopped. Never mind. Say it, I said. I thought I'd be, she said it quietly, almost to herself, as if she was figming something out in real time. I thought what I'd done would at least mean I was better than what you'd end up with. I know how that sounds. It sounds honest, I said. More honest than the conversation we had in the kitchen. I know. She was quiet for a beat. She doesn't look like someone who needed to do anything to become who she is. That's the impression I got. I said nothing. I think I understand what I was missing now, she said. What you actually wanted. I think I understand that I spent all of it solving the wrong problem. Probably, I said. But for what it's worth, you weren't wrong that you'd changed. You just assumed the change was visible to everyone, so it meant something to everyone. It didn't, because you'd already seen me. Because I'd already seen you, I confirmed. And I liked what I saw. I just needed you to believe it, and you never quite did. She didn't have an answer for that. We sat in the silence of it for a moment, and it was not a hostile silence, more like the quiet after something has been fully said and both people are just letting it settle. I should let you go, she said. Take care of yourself, I said. I mean that. You too. She hung up first. I sat with the phone in my hand for maybe 30 seconds. Outside, it was the kind of evening where the light goes golden and slow before it quits entirely, and I could see it coming through the kitchen window at the particular angle that meant it was close to 7. Camille was coming at 7:30. She'd said she'd bring that wine she'd been talking about for 2 weeks from a small producer she'd visited on a trip she'd taken with a university friend the previous summer. She'd told me about the trip in parts, a piece here, a piece there, in the way that people share things when they're deciding whether to trust you with more. I thought about what Saad had said. She doesn't look like someone who needed to do anything to become who she is. I'd thought about that distinction before, in less articulate terms, but Saad had named it clearly enough that I let it sit in my head for a moment. There are people who are in confidence through external feedback, who need the world to vote on them before they believe the result. And then there are people who don't start from a question about whether they're enough. It's not about appearance, exactly. It's not even about achievement. It's about the underlying assumption. Whether am I enough is a live question or a settled one. I'd fallen in love with Saad before the question became urgent for her, and I tried for years to settle it by being consistent, by paying attention, by making it obvious, and none of that had worked because she wasn't capable of taking that answer from me. She needed to take it from a wider source, and once she thought she had it, she'd recalibrated everything. And the miscalculation, the thing she'd worked out too late, was that she'd calculated me wrong. She thought what I wanted was beauty, or status, or the reflected esteem of being with someone others envied. She'd thought my love had been a kind of patience, a waiting for the better version of her to appear. She'd left expecting me to realize what I was losing once she became the person other men wanted. But I'd already known what I was losing. I'd known it while she packed. What she hadn't known, couldn't have known, because it would have required understanding what I actually valued, was that I was also losing a reason to keep waiting. I got up, washed the mug, and started on something to eat before Camille arrived. She came in at 7:32, holding the bottle with both hands like an offering, and the first thing she said was, "I sat in the car for 2 minutes because I was exactly on time and didn't want to be that person. I would have been fine with exactly on time." I know. I didn't want to be fine. I wanted to be casual. She handed me the bottle. "I have no chill. This is a known issue." I looked at the label, which I couldn't read because it was in a language I didn't have, and set it on the counter. She'd come straight from something. She had the particular quality of someone still transitioning, coat not yet fully off, mind not yet entirely here. She looked around the kitchen the way she always did when she arrived, a quick survey that wasn't evaluating so much as just taking in, the same way she looked at restaurant menus. Not hunting, just interested. "How was your day?" I asked. She made a sound that wasn't quite a word. "That bad. 3 meetings that could have been emails," she said, "and 1 email that should have been a conversation and wasn't because someone is conflict avoidant and prefers to be passive-aggressive in writing." She said it without heat, just as a report. "I'm fine. I just need 10 minutes to become a person again." "Take 20, I said. "I'm not done with the food yet." She took off her coat, draped it over the back of a chair, and sat at the kitchen table. I went back to what I was doing. We had the easy kind of quiet that takes a while to build with someone, where neither person feels the obligation to fill the space. I was aware of her at the table the way you're aware of good weather through a window. Present. Low maintenance. Real. After a few minutes, she said, without preamble, "You seem like you're thinking something." "I had a call earlier," I said. "From Saad." "A beat. How'd that go?" I thought about how to summarize it. She wanted to know if there was a way back. I said. "There wasn't." "Did that feel like anything?" I considered. "Completion," I said. "More than anything else." Camille looked at me for a moment with that expression she sometimes got. Not skeptical, not fully accepting, just measuring the accuracy of what she was hearing. Then she nodded, apparently satisfied. "That's a healthy answer," she said. "It's the true one. Sometimes those are the same," she said. I brought the food over and sat across from her, and she opened the wine, fumbling with the opener for a moment in a way that made her laugh at herself, which was one of the things I'd noticed early. She wasn't precious about her dignity, and poured 2 glasses. She said something interesting. I said, though I hadn't planned to. "What?" She said you didn't look like someone who had to do anything to become who you are. Camille was quiet for a moment. "That's perceptive," she said. I thought so. It's also sad that she said it. Why? Because it means she spent a long time feeling like she had to earn it. She turned the glass in her hand. "I don't say that to be unkind about her. I just think that sounds exhausting, to have your sense of yourself hinge on evidence." "It is," I said. "I watched it for a long time." "And you couldn't fix it." "No," I said. "Some things aren't yours to fix." She met my eyes across the table. "When did you know that?" "The morning she left," I said. "Maybe before." She thought about this. "So what did you do?" "Made coffee," I said, and let her go. Something in her expression shifted, the fine line between finding someone comprehensible and finding them interesting, and she was on the far side of it. "You're a strange person, Theo. I've heard that. It's not a criticism. I didn't take it as one." She smiled then, the full version, not the beginning of one. Outside, the evening light was completely gone, and the kitchen felt like its own contained world, the kind of world that is unremarkable and precise and warm in exactly the way it needs to be. "What's in this?" she said, with her fork above the plate. Guess. You're not going to tell me. Guess first. She took a bite, closed her eyes for a moment in the way she did when she was actually paying attention to something, and then began to list. Some of what she said was right. Some wasn't. She argued her wrong guesses with conviction. I let her argue. I corrected her eventually. She said I was wrong, which I wasn't. The wine was very good. She'd been right about that. She usually was.
Thanks for listening.